Tycoon, where can people find you, man?
And you can find me also on YouTube over at the Fantasy Boardroom. Most streams are simulcast on the Get Right Fantasy Network, so it's easy to bounce back and forth. But yeah, you can always find me there. And on Twitter, FF_Tycoon is the handle. Not as active on there as back in the day. I refuse to pay for that blue check mark, so just don't have quite the visibility as I once did on that app. But still like to chop it up over there for those that still do talk fantasy on Twitter.
I love it. I love it. And obviously, if you are tuned in, you can find me at The Extra Point over on YouTube live every Wednesday and Thursday night. Obviously, over on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it these days, at P. Ruskin. I'm on Sleeper. I am a writer for DynastyProsFootball.com. If you want to check out my written content. And for those that aren't able to tune into the live show, if you're bored and you're mowing the grass or you're walking around the house or doing the dishes, jump over to Spotify and Patreon and catch our podcast version. So let's pay some bills real quick, and then we will start this draft and get rocking and rolling. Y'all know what it is. On Mondays, catch Anthony and Frank 9 p.m. for our recap and waiver show. I'm going to pause here. On Tuesday, Tycoon, what do we have going on?
Well, I chose not to do the show yesterday with big happenings going on in our country. I figured attention was diverted. So when we get back this next Tuesday, I haven't come up with what we're going to do for the show. It largely is predicated on what we see in the weekend games. So we'll see what this weekend brings and what topic that then provides for the boardroom to discuss.
Love it. Check out Tycoon on every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, the Fantasy Boardroom. On Wednesdays, Anthony and Frank back with roster management, buy, sell, trade. And, of course, my show at 6 p.m. where we are talking all things Dynasty, trade targets, Dynasty content. And then again on Thursdays, I am back at 4 p.m. taking you right up to Thursday Night Football as we go through the DFS higher or lower segment presented by Underdog, weekly picks, all things betting. On Friday, we divide the slate of games into two parts. You can catch Kendall and Mike, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 o'clock Eastern for Start Sits Part 1. And then, of course, stay tuned immediately after for myself and Rasta as we go through the second half of the games for the week, Start Sits Part 2. And then don't miss Sunday Live with Mike, Classic Mike, as he takes you through actives, inactives, lives Q&A, getting you right up to kickoff. So we'll pay some bills here in a minute for Underdog, but I know I got guys in the room. They're ready to go. They're excited. I know you all that are listening are tuning in. Let's start this draft, boys. So I'm going to do what we always do, and we are going to randomize this draft order 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. And Tycoon, Kendall, I know you guys probably do, but if you can click that bell and turn the sounds off so when we're on the clock, we don't get some of that background noise. But we're going to start this draft. Again, for the folks that are listening, it is a 12-team rookie dynasty draft, full PPR, super flex. So without further ado, rock and roll.
You get the getting the draft board on screen?
Yes, I am.
All right. B. Griffin starting us off. Curious to see what everyone thinks. Obviously, Caleb was the previous 101. I think we all called that would flip for sure.
Yeah.
I wonder how far he'll fall.
Yep. So Jaden Daniels coming off the board at the 101, Malik Neighbors at the 102, which puts Kendall on the clock at the 103. Take your time. Please don't take all 4 hours. People don't want to listen to that much content, but I didn't want us to run out of time as we were talking about some players here. So
wow, this is serendipitous, isn't it? Wow.
Well, why don't you talk us through it's a mock draft. So talk us through your process here. Who's in your probably 2 or 3 in consideration in your pool here?
Yes, I won't take a lot of time, but I'll just take you kind of into, if I was really drafting a team here, right? The question is really between am I taking Caleb? I don't think any of their quarterbacks are realistically in consideration for me, even though Bo Nix is looking as good as he is, even though Drake May, I kind of like some things that I'm seeing there. I am just a massive believer in this point in Marv and I honestly Brock Bowers. If I'm going to throw out there, Brock Bowers is moving way up my boards. He's locked in Dynasty tight end 1. So I just wanted to get that thrown out there that I would seriously consider Bowers this highly given where he's at. But that being said, I am going to take I'm going to go ahead and take Caleb. This is a weird year. I don't love our play calling. Don't love a lot of what we have going on, but I've seen the flashes on the field. I don't love this pick as much as I would have, but I'm still sticking with Caleb here.
Yeah. Yep. A super flex league, obviously the two components that we don't know, of course, is like we don't have real rosters. So what is our team needs versus obviously are we drafting for best player available? I don't know. Do you guys have a particular take? Tycoon, I'll start with you. Are you taking more of the best player available, or are you drafting specifically for team need when you are on the clock in a dynasty rookie draft?
In a real dynasty rookie draft, not a mock, where you kind of have to go BPA since you don't have a roster to be drafting needs for.
Right.
But in general, I'd say it is a little bit team dependent how desperate I might be at a position. I'd say 80-20 best player available, though.
Okay.
I really, in Dynasty and particularly rookie drafts, I mean, sometimes, well, with running backs in particular, landing spot matters just because earlier usage often.
Yep.
But I try to not ignore landing spot, but keep it as minimal as a factor as possible and just focus on the talent, my evaluation of them as a prospect, and go with that player.
Yep. And Tycoon, as you are on the clock here, Kendall, I'll flip it to you. I know you're historically a very big trader. Are you drafting best player available in the hopes that even if it's not what your roster construction needs, you can get max value in a trade? Or are you still looking at best player available for your team? Or are you drafting for need?
I'd say in general, I'm a best player available. I'm going to let the market do its thing. And also, I don't join a dynasty league to leave anytime soon. I like the grind. I like rebuilds nearly as much as I like actually going for it. So I just want to accrue the best possible assets. And honestly, it's fun from how good are you as a ranker, right? If I'm drafting best player available, right, it's me against the game. How sharp are my calls? Can I really find the absolute best player available? And then how good am I at flipping that later on, right? So it keeps the game how I want to play it, right? And I like that quite a bit. The one thing I will say, the caveat is I find that in the trade market, this is league dependent, but across a slew of leagues that I'm in, quarterback in particular, even if it's not necessarily best player available, I'm going to lean quarterback because I feel like the quarterback trade market, particularly in Superflex, if you don't have one, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg for someone bare bones startable, right? There is no discount. There's a line in the sand where the worst quarterback, it's hard to get Will Levis for less than a second. He just doesn't drop lower because he's a quarterback. Right. And at the same time, if you hit, you kind of have an unlimited range there. So I lean quarterback above everything just positionally because the way I see the value in Superflex. And this is different from how I start players. I when Bryce was going through his rough patch, I was regularly starting a wide receiver instead of the quarterback. But when it comes to the trade market, it's just there's such a value insulation where the floor is. We normally talked about cap ceilings. Right. When you draft a quarterback in Superflex, there's a capped floor that keeps it from sinking too far if you're a savvy trader. So I'm going to lean a little bit heavy quarterback, otherwise BPA.
Yep. I was going to, we're kind of going through this here. I've got a pretty long clock on. So I think for me, what we were going to do is kind of talk through some guys at the end, and we still will, but Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Brock Bowers, Rome Odunze, and now Bo Nix going off the board. I'm going to pause after Odunze. We're 10 weeks into the season. That's basically the top 6 consensus picks that we had in April when we were actually doing these drafts for real. So other than Bowers, who is obviously tight end 1 right now, having a phenomenal season, Devontae Adams is out the door. Is there really anything that, I won't say surprises you guys, because again, this was pretty much what we saw in April, but how do you feel after these first 5 picks?
No, there's really no surprises. The reorganization of the top 6 here is exactly what I expected, frankly.
Yeah.
If you asked me to make the prediction right before going in here, up through 6, it's exactly how I would have had it. So
yeah.
Really,
Kendall, I know, Kendall, you mentioned you were super high on Bowers. I want to just flip this question to you real quick. We're doing a Superflex league tonight. Let's say that we were doing a single quarterback league. How high are you comfortable taking Brock Bowers in a single quarterback format? We'll still stick with full PPR.
So obviously that eliminates all the quarterbacks. We're just talking about positional players here,
Yep.
right? I'm seriously considering Bowers after Neighbors in the Marv, Rome, BTJ Bowers. I can find a world where Bowers goes above Marv.
Okay.
Again, it's a pass catcher versus a pass catcher, right? It is Dynasty, it is double flex, and this is not tight end premium, but it is a situation where I do value having it. He's the locked and loaded Dynasty tight end one right now. He's producing immediately. He's scored more fantasy points than Marv this season already with atrocious quarterback play. His next 3 years of points per game, I think there's a very real thing to Bowers actually outscoring these guys. I think Rome is going to pass him up. I think BTJ passes him up. I think Marv passes him up at some point. But in the meantime, Bowers is kind of it. So I still think I'm going to slot him a little bit behind just because it's not tight end premium. So in the trade market, his value is going to be affected a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have him in that mix. I wouldn't let him fall past BTJ for sure, which is, I guess, kind of what we had. But I'd consider moving him up. And Marv would not be the top of my list, by the way, for that. I would have Rome and BTJ above him at this point.
Okay. Tycoon in a tight end premium league. Is Bowers the 102? Is he the 103? Is he the 101? Single quarterback.
Oh, super flex. Oh, single quarterback.
No,
tight
single
end premium. He's the 101.
Is he the 101? Yeah.
And tight end premium, yes, I would take him even over Neighbors in that case. I think, and even in regular, or I guess tight end standard, I would still take him even too. I would take him over Marv. I would take him over Rome. I would take him over Thomas. I just think that while it's been kind of a down year for tight ends, and so it's been a little more homogenous, and it kind of was last year too, I still think that truly elite tight end is a bit of positional scarcity that you can use to your advantage. And having this guy produce literally from day one, I wouldn't be able to pass it up. So yeah. And tight end premium, easy 101 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a really good it's an exercise, right? I think at the end of the day, we talk about the value of positional scarcity at the tight end position, and how long Mark Andrews and how long Travis Kelce have been able to produce those just kind of outlier seasons. And that's, obviously Sam Laporta had an outlier touchdown season at finishing as the tight end one last year, and that's what made him an outlier in the position. Bowers as the tight end one this season. My questions really is going to come down to, Kendall, you said it, and this is why I want to kind of use it to transition. It's pass catcher versus pass catcher. So this tight end class is Bowers and then fill in the blank here. You know what I mean? Like probably Theo Johnson, in my opinion, at this point is probably the tight end 2 in this class. Maybe Ben Sinnott, but we haven't seen much from Sinnott, right? We saw one trick play 2 weeks ago for a touchdown, and that's fine. But I guess from a pass catching perspective, it was pretty much in April, Marv, Neighbors, Rome. That was the big 3. I have to include Brian Thomas Jr. BTJ's in that conversation. And my question for Kendall, I'll start with you. Number one, what we've seen from Ladd McConkey lately, does he belong in that conversation as a big 4? And if he doesn't, are Neighbors, Harrison, and BTJ and Rome, how do you rank those guys? Single quarterback or just wide receiver rankings. That doesn't really matter on the format necessarily, but let's just go with what we thought was the consensus 3, and clearly what we've seen from BTJ now as a 4th receiver. You're on the clock. You have your pick. Who are you taking?
Ladd is a tier below those guys.
I agree.
He's a tier above Worthy, right? But above those 3, he's a tier below. Not because he doesn't have a safe floor, and I'm probably the highest I know on Herbert. I really think that's going to be a fine situation. But I think it really comes down to ceiling. I don't see him as someone who's going to consistently be an elite fantasy player, an alpha wide receiver 1, someone who's talked about as, is he a high-end wide receiver 2 or is he a wide receiver 1? Ladd's not going to be in that. I think Ladd is one of those tried and true, really comfortable. I'd love to see him in the wide receiver 2 conversation, probably a low-end 2, high-end 3. I see him in that category, so not with him. So how do I rank the power 3? Neighbors is we're talking PPR for most dynasties, so I'm definitely going Neighbors. His role, what I've seen, there's a lot of Jamar Chase to him. There's a lot of players to him, but the fact that he's getting 12 balls thrown to him a game, he's an elite separator, and he's just going to be the guy in that offense for a long time. Neighbors is clearly there. The next two are interesting. I think Marv gets there, but right now it's between. This is going to sound crazy, but I'm Rome and BTJ over Marv at this point, as crazy as that sounds, but it's truly how I believe they're going to be set up later on. BTJ, I think, is going to be an elite AJ Brown type of weapon. He's the only thing that's working in that offense. And I do think it's pretty much, it's not matchup dependent. He's going to be good either way. The injuries scare me a little bit. Rome, you know me, big Bears fan, but I really do think just where that offense is going to be next year as soon as they lose Keenan. Like when I compare Rome and Marv in particular, right? They're actually pretty similar this year, and they're not getting as many targets. The offenses aren't as good as we hoped they'd be. They're a little more frustrating than they are. But when I see long term, right, I like Kyler, but I'm very disappointed by the fact that he's not making it happen with Marv, and I feel like he really should. That Marv's whole thing was he's supposed to walk into a neighbors-like situation, and without seeing it and seeing the ball go a million different places, that scares me a little bit. So I think Marv and Rome are pretty close. Probably for trade value, I have to take Marv because I can get more, for him, and I can trade for Rome for less. But if it's really down to long-term value, they're neck and neck for me.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the season so far, right? I mean, obviously it's only 9 games, 10 games in, but Marv is wide receiver 23, 55 targets, 28 catches, 445 and 5. But he's the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on his team. He's the clear supposed to be target hog on his team. Rome is very clearly the wide receiver 2B on the team, if not the wide receiver 3. He's wide receiver 59 on the season. Only 11 less targets at 44. He's caught 25 balls, only 3 less catches, 391 and 1. So I'm with you. I think at the end of the day, you're going to see Keenan Allen probably be playing elsewhere next year if he's in the league. I don't know that he comes back to Chicago, and we expect Rome to make that year 2 leap. Neighbors, wide receiver 13 on the season, 85 targets, 55 catches, 557 and 3. And BTJ's wide receiver 11, 53 targets, right? So he's 35 catches, 595 and 5. So from a production standpoint, BTJ has done the most with, other than Rome, the least. And so I think the question that I've always had about BTJ, and Tycoon, this is what I'm going to throw to you. The question that I've always had about BTJ wasn't really the talent, because I liked him coming out. And now I think that the bias, or, kind of whatever you want to call it, a confirmation bias, if you liked BTJ, was that he clearly is good enough. The question is what is his ceiling compared to these other guys with Trevor Lawrence long-term? Because Lawrence is on that contract. So Tycoon, do you think Trevor Lawrence helps, hurts, or just kind of, what do you think his long-term value is with Lawrence, knowing that's his quarterback for at least the next couple of years?
I don't think it adversely affects his ceiling much. I'm kind of the wrong guy as far as Thomas goes. That's probably my biggest whiff of this entire rookie class is kind of fading Brian Thomas. I have very little of him, and I hate myself for it. So
you're here. I'm there.
Yeah, very wrong on that. And yeah, now I'd have him third. But no, I don't think Lawrence is a negative factor. Maybe I'm still a bit delusional, even though he's looking a little busty at times. I still believe in Trevor myself. I still think he'll be, I guess, considered at worst a mid-level average NFL quarterback, and those guys can still create wide receiver 1s with regularity. We see it every single season. So yeah. So I think as long as Thomas continues to do what he's been doing, the ceiling is the roof.
Yeah, I've been very on record many times in many shows, my show, betting shows, our main shows on Friday nights, talking about my belief that the Jaguars are awful this season, and they've been awful this season. But to your point, awful doesn't mean bad for fantasy, right? We've got the wide receiver 11 on
means the opposite,
Yeah,
a lot of garbage time.
Exactly. So I think for me, I know, Kendall, you're not going to like this, but I have BTJ as the wide receiver 3 in this class right now ahead of Rome. And I love Rome. I love Rome a lot. I think when you look at DJ Moore is not going anywhere. I don't know that Matt Eberflus is the coach next season. I think you'd probably agree with that. It's possible, but I think it's very possible.
Kind of hope he's not. Defensive
I think a lot of people hope.
Not what we need right now.
I just you know what, and I don't want to turn this is a fantasy show. I don't want to turn this into a coaching show, but for 10 seconds, Caleb's body language, and maybe Caleb's just kind of a prima donna kid. I don't know him at all, but his body language says that he just brushes Eberflus off. Like, yeah, whatever. I just have to get through this year, and then they're going to get this guy out of here and get me, quote unquote, a real coach. Like, that's how I felt watching Hard Knocks. Like, I didn't get that sense that Eberflus was really passing on all this great knowledge in film, and Caleb was soaking it up. I don't know. Do you guys? Let's just talk about that for 10 seconds. Do you guys? I know you watched Hard Knocks, and you see the body language on the sidelines on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays. But like, do you get that same feeling, or am I the only one that feels that way?
It's like when you take this one.
Well, yeah. So as a USC fan, I will say that's just kind of his demeanor a lot of the time. I don't think there's a ton to read into there. I specifically from the clips where he's talking to Eberflus in his office and they're reviewing film and he's sitting there taking notes. I know exactly what you're saying because it's easy to interpret it that way. And I even thought that, but again, having watched Caleb for the last couple of years relatively closely, I couldn't really take it that far.
Fair enough.
Now, and I think it's also the reason it creeped into my brain was a little bit of confirmation bias in a way, because that's what I think. That's, as you were just saying, that's kind of my opinion of Eberflus, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Caleb kind of expects him to be a short timer. But am I just projecting? I might be. Well,
so to the point we went off track there for a second, but the point I wanted to make was that BTJ, I believe firmly, is going to be the one in this offense. Rome is not, right? Like he could be if DJ Moore gets injured, if DJ Moore something happens, right? He could be, but like DJ Moore's under contract and he's going to be in this team and he's going to be the guy we anticipate. Maybe it's a 1B, 1A situation, right? But Kendall, do you see a world outside of injury where Rome honestly is the wide receiver one? Let's say Keenan's gone, because this is my argument of why I believe volume for BTJ, even with the quarterback situation. I think Caleb should be a better quarterback in the long run, or at least the next couple of years, than Caleb will be. But do you see a world where Rome could honestly be the guy over DJ Moore? Because that's partially why I'm basing the BTJ ranking is the wide receiver one. It's the volume. So how do you see that in Chicago as a Bears fan?
I see BTJ and Rome like similarly in their role in the offense, right? Like early on, we saw that like, hey, the Jags can't do anything on offense. Oh, hey, 40-yard shot to BTJ. That's nice, right? Like you're not seeing the Jags unless you're watching Red Zone for BTJ's big play, right? Like that's the only time you really want to see.
You mean you're not tuning into the Jaguars game on Sundays? Come on, man.
They play at 9 a.m. every Sunday, right?
Well, they play in London half. Yeah, they play in London half the season.
Exactly. Absolutely not. But the point I'm trying to make is, right, I like both of them for like the same reason. We're mincing hairs a little bit. One of them's ahead of the other, but I believe in one offense a little bit more longer term, right? I think the Bears offense long term with Caleb specifically, I like Caleb over Trevor. And I already like the chemistry that's kind of happening there. I see them as both. They're deep threats, so their yards per target, their ADOT, all that stuff is fantastic. They're red zone weapons, which is fantastic. So they catch the touchdowns and they catch the big catches, right? That's what you want. PPR, non-PPR, doesn't matter. That's what you want. That's where the big points are coming from. And in the positive game scripts, that's how you get these 40-point blow-up games, right? So I want access to one of them. I think it's mincing some hairs. Here's where it's like BTJ is much better right now. He is the one in that offense. He will continue to be the one in that offense, and the team has bigger holes. So everything just kind of goes around him. With Rome, we're figuring it out. Head coach issue. Are we going to figure out the passing game? Or are we just going to make Swift work? There's a lot of question marks. So generally, I would say from a dynasty perspective, there's a lot less red flags with BTJ. The offense is already pretty bad, and he's doing really well. So I would put him ahead of Rome. I do think Rome has more upside later on. If Caleb really does do what I think he can do, and if we just had an offensive play caller, if we had Ben Johnson, who was rumored to be looking at the Chicago job, if we had Ben Johnson, Rome is immediately over him and Marv. Like that upside would be just insane, right? So I'm keeping that in mind because I'm not going to go down as the Bears guy who was like, no, BTJ because of blah, blah, blah. And then Rome does his thing later. I'm not going to get caught like that because Rome is that good. Wherever he went, he was going to be that good. It has nothing to do with the Bears. You saw the way, the way that some of the guys that came on the herd, I think over Colin Coward, they really talked him up in a way that I can't unhear.
Yeah.
So I'm there, but I'm splitting hairs. I'm saying, if it's a tiebreaker, I don't know. Do you want to win now or do you want to play for upside? I think in the trade market, BTJ is worth more. I tend to be a stockbroker when it comes to Dynasty quite a bit. So I'm going to go with the value now because I can flip and parlay it right now where I don't have to wait for Rome, right?
Yeah. Well, let's drop down a tier because Kendall, like you said that earlier, right? We were talking. So BTJ at the 108. I took Drake May at the 109. It's super flex league. I like what I've seen. Small sample size, but Drake May in four games as a starter, and one of those was the concussion against the Jets. 30% snap share there. QB 28 on the season, 125 attempts, 82 completions, 770 and 6, 4 picks, 209 and a rushing touchdown though. So he does run a little bit. But then we talk about this next tier down of wide receivers. So we see Xavier Worthy at the 110, followed by Brooks, and then McConkey at the 112, Coleman at the 201, and then we've not seen a receiver come off the board. So Worthy, McConkey, Coleman, I agree with you guys. That is kind of the next tier down. Where do you see McConkey, Worthy, and Coleman? In what order, Tycoon, would you rank those players based off of what we've seen so far in this season relative to what they were drafted? Because Worthy, for the most part, was drafted over McConkey, and that has actually stuck here in this mock draft again tonight.
Yeah, which is frankly stunning to see, in my opinion. For me, it's McConkey, Coleman, and Worthy bringing up the rear. My pre-draft, actually, that was the order I had him in going into rookie drafts
in April. Yeah, nice.
Worthy got a lot of people excited in week 1, but I think he's oh god, why can I not remember the guy's name? The Rams, that he's fancy Tavon Austin. That's who he is. So
that's a good comp.
I mean,
that's a good comp, actually.
So really, my excitement over the 4 games a year where he is going to pop for 25 plus, that's great. But I'm not willing to stomach the 8 sub 5-point games from him. I think he's attractive to people just because he's on the Chiefs. If he was anywhere else, he would be completely ignored. So he's not. I don't even think he's in the same tier as McConkey and Coleman. I think he's another tier below. And I have McConkey over Coleman. That's maybe a little bit of just current situation bleeding into it because I think McConkey's right now the best receiver on the Chargers. But Quentin Johnston's kind of having some nice games. Maybe he's emerging into the first round pick he was, or at least living up to that billing. But I don't know that McConkey's good enough that the Chargers are not going to ultimately look to establish a true alpha outside wide receiver at some point. So that could change between him and Coleman. But for now, I would have McConkey, Coleman, and Worthy last.
Kendall, I'm on the clock.
Mm-hmm.
I am, you know me, very clearly looking at a wide receiver here. So my question to you is there a wide receiver? Because Tycoon just said he believes Worthy's actually a tier below McConkey and Coleman. I agree with that. So is there a wide receiver here that you think, A, should be in that tier with McConkey and Coleman, or is there a tier below where the wide receiver should be considered with Worthy, and potentially I'm getting good value here, 8 picks after the last wide receiver has come off the board here at the 209?
Yeah. I think your boy Slick Rick is getting really.
Well, you knew who I was going to take, but yeah.
yeah. I look, it's a similar argument to Worthy where I'm taking into account the offense that he's going to be going into, but I'm also building a couple things together. Like, one, I already thought he was massively talented, and his involvement so quickly, quicker than I thought. Even when he got, I know he didn't have a big game or anything, but he got involved pretty quick. Combined with a good offense, combined with the fact that I think that Debo is gone in the offseason. Yeah. If you just look next year, he's the wide receiver too to a kind of disappointing Brandon Ayuk and an aging Kittle and an offense and an aging CMC. It's like, everything falls away, and Pearsall year 2 is great. Sorry, Pearsall in year 2 is good. Pearsall in year 3 could be fantastic. Like, everyone's gone. CMC, Kittle, Ayuk will be 29 when he's in his year 3. Just keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, I see just the arrows going all up for Ricky Pearsall. We haven't seen enough of him on the field, compared to, say, like Xavier Legette. Actually, we've seen a little bit of it on field, and we already know he's kind of walking into the one pretty quickly. But I think Slick Rick is more talented in a better situation and a better offense. It's just all the arrows are up. It's his opportunity to really screw up, and I don't see that happening. So, yeah, I think he belongs above Worthy into that tier, and I would knock Worthy. I would keep Worthy at the tail end of that tier. I wanna disrespect him because he's pissed me off, but he's still on the Chiefs, and so I'm going to give him just the Chiefs extra runway. Would it surprise anybody if he catches a touchdown the next 4 games because it's the Chiefs and their offense is starting to click? Maybe. Like, in a way that, like, Coleman has made some actual awful mistakes. Worthy, it's just as much on Mahomes for missing him in many spots as it is on Worthy, in my opinion, in a couple of cases. So I'll give him a little bit of leeway.
Tycoon, you had your hand raised like we was back in school here.
I don't want to be shouting over. I don't want to be some goofy first take kind of show.
The floor is yours.
Back to Pearsall.
The first take, I love it.
Even as far as year 2 goes, Ayuk's not going to be back till mid-season. He will not be ready to start the season with this knee injury. So if Debo is gone and Ayuk is out until week 6, 7, 8, so it's the Jawan Jennings and the Ricky Pearsall show again.
Yep.
That could be really a chance for him to establish his role.
So let me ask you guys this, because for those that are listening at home or for those that are not able to see the board for whatever reason, Keon Coleman at the 201, McCarthy at the 202, Penix 203, and then a big running back run. Trey Benson, Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, Tyrone Tracy, Ray Davis. So would you put Pearsall, because I'll be honest, and you guys know this, other than Tyrone Tracy, who has come not kind of out of nowhere, but because obviously we knew there was opportunity behind Singletary. He was kind of that last, darling in the 4th round, get him on your taxi squad kind of a guy. Hope you have a gold mine. Would you put Pearsall ahead of any of those running backs? And if so, who? Again, Benson, Bucky, Braylon Allen, Tracy, and Ray Davis before Ricky Pearsall at the 209, and then Blake Corum at the 210. Because I see a clear tier break here. So, Kendall, where do you have Pearsall relative to those running backs? Because we know this is not a great running as it stands today. Could improve next year. We know things change. Someone's going to emerge. It always happens. But as we see it today, this is not a good running back class, and it was not supposed to be. So it's kind of living up to what it wasn't supposed to be, unfortunately. But where do you have Pearsall against that running back group?
I have him above. He's 1. I have Pearsall above that whole class. In my opinion, this class is benefiting from the fact that there's no one around him, and this incoming class is much better. Like, the second rounders in this upcoming class and like fantasy drafts would be pushing Brooks and Benson in this particular
draft. There's going to be a dozen really good running backs.
Yeah, I mean, literally an actual
whole round.
So what I'm saying is landing spots. All of these running backs, I see a lot of Kyron situations happening. We're like, Kyron, they drafted who? Every running back that gets drafted is kind of nasty, and it's going to be nasty for all these guys. So I'm taking Pearsall because the arrow only goes up, and it's just a better asset class in Dynasty, right? We want running backs because they're scarce, but at the same time, like, we should all kind of abandon them too, in a little bit of a way. So I would put Ricky Pearsall number 1. I'm going to put Tyrone Tracy right behind him because the Giants have so many other issues. I do see Tracy stepping into a big role, and I've seen enough right away that I really like it. Bucky, I actually think probably gets caught in a messier timeshare, and I don't think he has the full breakup that everyone wishes he's going to have.
Yeah.
I'm kind of selling high on him, low-key. I hate to say I have him everywhere, so everyone that's in a Dynasty league with me, stop listening. But yeah, I like Bucky.
Or start sending offers.
Yeah, it's going to be Pearsall, then Tracy, then Bucky, because he is guaranteed that offense looks money. So even if he is never going to be elite, that's kind of a tier in and of itself for me. I like that. Then I would put the rest of the guys, shuffle them up however you want to based on, your particular build. But it's kind of like it's everyone else in that first kind of upper crust level.
Yeah. So Tycoon, look, we got Trey Benson here at the running back 66 right now. 39 carries, 154 yards and a touchdown. Last week was his first touchdown. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 30 yards. He's not a pass catcher, or at least he's not in this offense. I was very high on Benson coming out, and I still like Benson. And for those that are new to the show, or for those that haven't heard this take in a while, I was high on Benson. Number one, I did like the talent. I thought he was a good player at Florida State coming out, and then obviously he had a ton of touchdowns, not Blake Corum level touchdowns. But I think we all understand James Conner does 2 things. He gets injured and misses time, and he's old. He's not going to be around forever. And so I think that's why a lot of people were excited about Benson. So my big question to you is, we're not going to talk about rankings for a second. Have you seen enough from Benson? And again, it's a limited sample size, but with most of these guys, other than Bucky, it's a limited sample size. Have you seen enough, if he's on your current Dynasty roster, to feel like you have a plug-and-play RB2 next season? RB3? Like, where do you have him as far as like your comfort level? Let's say you've got Saquon. You've got a plug-and-play weekly guy, right? You can insert name here, right? Bijan, Gibbs, Saquon. Do you feel good about Trey Benson next year as an RB2, or is he lower in your personal depth chart on some of your teams and your rosters?
He is lower. Actually, hold on 1 second. I want to look up one thing. What is James Conner's contract situation? I think he's still under contract next season.
I think next season's his last year. Yeah. I think, but they might have an out on it.
Do they have a voidable year next year?
I don't know. That's what I was just going to look up. I should have had that in front of me, but we'll find out.
Not that they would. I don't
this
think.
This is 2024. Is his last year. He is a free agent next season.
Okay, so that's what I didn't want to call you out on the show.
I
think that's it. Yeah,
probably. Yes, I would say if I had to guess right now with the current state of the Cardinals, they probably wouldn't want to bring back 30-year-old James Conner as their lead back.
Right.
If he was still under contract for another year, I would say no, because Conner's actually been with the he did miss I think a 4-game stretch last year, but otherwise the last couple of years has honestly held up quite well, and has kind of just been a machine. So as long as Conner's in the way, it really does limit Benson. Like you said, we haven't been able to see much of him because Conner's rolling.
Yeah, he's RB14 right now. I mean, he's having a good season.
But yeah, with the expectation that Conner will not be in the picture next year, yeah, I would view Benson as a low-end RB2 plug-and-play. Yeah.
Kendall,
with potential for more, but I would count on him as a low-end 2 floor.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Kendall, in the Hall of Fame league, Conner just went for a first-round pick.
Yeah, I seen that. That was
oh my goodness,
that was pretty crazy, man.
Wow. All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I'm still into Benson, right? Like, I mean, obviously the run and the touchdown last week, like, great, but like I said, guys, like, this running back class just hasn't been impressive. And we know things change, right? We know somebody's going to emerge. I would have thought, other than Tyrone Tracy, who has emerged, I would have thought at least one more guy would have come out of this group. I guess Bucky did, but like, I think we figured Bucky would be something. So
I'll give Ray Davis a half a point for that.
Yeah, he had a monster catch last weekend.
He's knocking on the door of, like, if he didn't have Cooks ahead of him, like, he would have passed up Irving. Like, if he had Irving's competition, basically put him in that spot, he's doing better with what he's got. Like, Irving's doing well, but I'd say Ray Davis is arguably doing more with less opportunities.
So let me ask you guys this, because I think coming out of rookie draft season, correct me if I'm wrong in your leagues, but in almost all the leagues that I was in, Blake Corum was mostly the consensus RB3 in this class. Is that kind of what you guys saw in your leagues? Mostly?
For the most part, yeah.
I'd say the majority, yeah.
Okay. So then let me ask you this. Kyron's on a rookie contract. He's clearly the guy. McVay loves him. Cooper Kupp may or may not be there next year. Puka's obviously going to be there. Kendall, what is Blake Corum's value right now? Is he a hold? I don't think you can sell him for very much. Are you trying to buy him on the cheap? Like, where do you see Blake Corum in this offense in a dynasty format? Because there's a lot of people that drafted him with their second-round pick, and you're not playing him. So where do you see him?
Corum is he same things happened in a Corum just earlier than happened to Charbonnet. right? Like we all like Charbonnet.
All right, interesting comp. Here we go.
Problem is the guy in front of him. It doesn't matter how good you are, okay? If the guy in front of you is just that good, relatively speaking, you're that much worse, even if you're good.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. All right, Charbonnet, fantastic. Charbonnet, and I agree. I don't think it would have panned out this way, but Charbonnet, talent profile-wise, would have been the RB1 in this class. He is a better running back
Agreed.
in college than Jonathan Brooks was. Very, arguably touchdowns, aside. But Kenneth Walker is just that dude. Kenneth Walker is closer to Breece Hall. In that draft class, he really was close to Breece Hall. He just wasn't Breece Hall, but he's clearly fantastic. So I think you're seeing that with Kyron. Kyron's fantastic. He's doing fine with all the work. He's healthy. Remember when CMC was made of glass, then he wasn't?
Right.
Remember when Kyron was made of glass, and then he wasn't?
Yep.
You're seeing that. And what's happening to Corum? Hey, man, when Kyron's not made of glass, man, learn. Grab your notebook and learn. But you're not seeing the field because there's absolutely no reason for you to do so. And from a fantasy perspective, right, the real NFL functions way differently. Like Corum's role in the NFL is much more important, realistically to a roster and how that works than it is to fantasy, unfortunately. So, no, I think Corum's pretty tough, but you have to hold him because handcuff value. Running backs get injured all the time.
Sure.
It still happens. It makes no sense to sell him without some sort of. Does it have to be a real injury? You need a questionable tag next to Kyron at a minimum, then you can sell him, right? Because there's at least the narrative that you can sell. But yeah, he's a hold, but I don't like it long term. I don't. Kyron's not going anywhere. So this is like pure handcuff. There is no standalone value for him with that coaching staff. Some coaches are all about committees. Too many of them. But this is the one offense, one coach in the NFL that's like, no, like historically, it's always that. We knew that going in. So and I have to make a pick here, but yeah, that's kind of where I see Corum. It's all negative arrows for me.
Tycoon, do you see, let's say Kyron's unavailable for a stretch of time. Is Corum really going to take the lion's share of that workload? Does it become a mini? You do think so? You don't think it becomes a mini committee? Okay.
Totally. Okay. No, to Kendall's point just now, McVay, assuming Corum does well enough, early enough that he gets McVay's trust.
Yep.
If McVay trusts him, he's going to lock and load with him.
Yep.
It's simple, is how I view it.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think I do look at him as a bit of a buy low because Williams did miss 5 weeks last year.
Yeah.
So his injury history, he's held up well this year, but his injury history is still there at the most injured position. That's a handcuff I certainly want.
Would you guys rather have, quick toss up, and if you're in the chat, I'd like to know your answers to this question as well. Would you rather have Braylon Allen or Blake Corum?
Corum
Not
for
easy.
me. Not by much. I'm not even sure I'm 100% convinced of that. But if I need to give an answer right now, I think I would say Corum.
Yeah, guys in the chat, throw your answer in there. I see one here coming up. Looks like we've got an answer for Braylon Allen.
And I know Allen's actually gotten some run, unlike Corum, but I still view Breece Hall being in front of a player as a much more of a disadvantage than Kyron Williams being in front of somebody.
Well, that's what I was kind of getting at, right? Like, and you've seen, actually, to be fair, Braylon Allen's involvement in his usage has gone down since the firing of Robert Saleh. They've used Breece more. He was much more involved earlier in the season. And since they've had the changeover at offensive coordinator or offensive play caller off of Hackett, that has changed, right? So it's hard for me with Corum. I'm struggling with Corum. I don't have any shares of him. I have 0 shares of him. Simply being, I didn't believe in this running back class. And if I have to take a shot in the middle of the second round, unless there's a running back I really believe in, I'm almost always going to take the shot on the wide receiver. So that's why I don't have any shares of Corum. He was also one of those guys that I was okay being wrong on. And I thought to myself, same thing, Kendall, that you had said this offseason, right? Like, or that you said that just now about the offseason, is the narrative around Blake Corum was it's going to be a committee. Kyron gets hurt. He's a touchdown guy. He's going to get the goal line work. Touchdowns are a sticky stat and they translate. And all of that in theory was true. Until you remember that McVay is a one running back guy. Todd Gurley. Kyron Williams, right? Like that has been his model. That has always been his model. And I see a Blake Corum and I'm saying, okay, 10 games into a season now, he's got 21 carries. He's not getting the ball at all. And that to me, it's like, if I want to see something and I need to see something to feel good about a player, Tycoon, the question I asked you earlier about, is Trey Benson a guy that you have seen enough of to feel comfortable having at a low end mid-range RB2? You've at least got a sample size.
Yeah.
You've at least seen something, or at least you've seen, you know, like Ray Davis, you have a sample size. You saw a great, was it 76-yard catch and run last week with a pretty good open field move to create the rest of that 30 yards to score that touchdown. Like, to me, that says, okay, I have seen enough, or I've seen, like, Tyron Tracy's an outlier because I do think he's going to end up being the RB1 in New York, but Bucky's involved. You feel good about Bucky, but I'm having a hard time with Corum. I'm having a hard time getting there. So go ahead.
I'm going to throw in, so back to different perspective as to why I think, oh shoot, I'm the one on the clock. Hold on.
I should have let you know.
You're good. You got through it. Well, that's what Tycoon. While you're making this pick,
that in just a second.
Yeah. So Ricky Pearsall at the 209, Bucky, Blake Corum at the 210, Xavier Legette 211, and Audric Estimate to round out the second round at the 212. At the 301, it's Jalen Wright, followed by Jatavian Sanders, and then two quick wide receivers here, Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk. So Jalen back to back here with Tycoon on the clock at the 305. Look, the consensus won a first round in April. Pretty much is how it looked here in our round tonight. The consensus second round, Keon Coleman, A.D. Mitchell, some combination of Corum and Benson, Bo Nix, Ricky Pearsall, Legette, maybe Jalen Polk. Ben Sinnott is one of those real fallers. I think he was kind of that hot darling, take your shot on a tight end, positional scarcity opportunity with old Zach Ertz there and a Cliff Kingsbury offense. Sinnott here just going right now at the 306, so dropping basically a full round. Penix, for obvious reasons, was drafted, you know, kind of in the second round as a super flex, but then Jalen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd. So you're seeing some guys here, Lloyd and Ben Sinnott, that were second rounders falling to the third, Jalen Polk falling to the third. Tyron Tracy obviously is the biggest riser of the group, but it's and Ray Davis in this particular mock. Obviously, he was a third round guy as well. But I think it's interesting that except for a handful of players, most of the guys have pretty much stuck relatively close to ADP of what it was in April. So any thoughts, guys, on – I want to switch to actually, I don't even want to talk about these tight ends. I just don't. I can't bring myself to talk about him. Let's talk about Xavier Legette for a minute since we're kind of getting to that end of that second round. Blake Corum, we just spent a little bit of time on. Everybody in Carolina has now been traded away. Not that there was much there to begin with. Adam Thielen's on IR. Deontay Johnson is now in Baltimore. Jonathan Mingo is in LA with the Rams. No, where did he just go? Cowboys. Sorry, I don't know why my brain went to the Rams. Yes, thank you. He went to the Cowboys. Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate that. Is Xavier Legette, obviously he's the de facto wide receiver one. What ceiling does he have from a fantasy perspective with Bryce Young in this version of the Panthers? Kendall, we'll start with you.
Well, he gets all the targets.
He should.
And he is someone whose body type, physicality, he should be able to win 50-50s. He should benefit from a quarterback doesn't need to be ridiculously accurate and throw him open. I'm sure he'd like that, but he doesn't necessarily need it. Bryce has gotten better. I still think it's a team that's going to run the ball as often as possible, but their defense isn't good enough, right? So they're going to have to throw the ball. You see it in redraft every year where there's plenty of fantasy options in the waiver wire. They're going to get you 10+ points every single week because there's no one left, and they're a great spot start for a lot of reasons. That's kind of where Legette is at the tail end of his rookie year, where he's just the guy. He's going to get the ball a bunch in a team that should be in negative game scripts. So that's going to force him on the field, force him into a productive standpoint, and he's a red zone target. I kind of like it. It's like he's in a good spot where he should get a lot of volume, but it's really, really bad volume because it's a bad offense. So how do you view, what should be like a less skilled, an alpha in terms of snap share and targets, but not an alpha in terms of talent on a bad offense? How do you feel about that type of player is really what the question is, right? Because it's less about Xavier and more about his situation. And is opportunity just the best? We know at running back, opportunity is kind of almost everything. You'd rather have more opportunity than talent sometimes. With this in Carolina, I think it's reasonable, right? Like, I think his upside is better than all the other guys who haven't really shown it, and you're not sure when they're going to get on the field, and you're not sure about their offense, right? Like, Troy Franklin's a guy that's still on the board, and he's kind of iffy on talent, iffy on situation, iffy on if he'll play, right? Like, you're going to take Xavier over that class of player, right? Polk is, he was getting all the snaps. Now it's getting peeled back. Like, his wave's already kind of almost sliding down a little bit. Xavier's going to get way more volume than that. So I like him. I don't really know who to compare him against other than he's kind of in this tier of his own where there's these guys that are good with opportunity and upside. Then there's Xavier because he's at the bottom of that tier, but you like him. And then there's everywhere else, right? So, like, for me, I took Jalen McMillan at the 3-3 here. I kind of have to compare him to Leggett. And I'm like, no, I would absolutely categorically have Leggett higher because he's on the field right now as a rookie, and he's the one, and he's just going to be that for a minute. You know, he's going to have a chance to do something. I don't know how talented he is. I mean, do you guys really think you know how talented he is? I'm not really sure until I really see all the opportunity. But I think he's going to be decent with it. I don't see him as anything more than a low-end wide receiver 2, maybe a high-end wide receiver 3 in the NFL. But that's fantastic at his draft cost in a rookie draft, right? Like, I'm thrilled with that where I'm getting him. So I like him.
Tycoon, let me switch gears for just a second. Let's put this to and this is a challenging thought, but take your time on this one. Let's say it's a startup draft. Where would you have Leggett, roughly? What round are you comfortable taking him in a rookie startup, not an auction, in a rookie startup draft snake format?
That is an excellent question.
I don't ask the easy ones.
I gotta think here. I'm trying to recall the most recent startup I was in and where guys in his.
He's wide receiver 53 on the season right now. Right.
And he's a guy I would say probably like late 8th round into the 9th round is where I'm probably looking at Leggett. Okay. And yeah, here in my most recent startup, which was before the season, he went near the end of the 10th. So yeah, I'd probably take him around to 2 rounds earlier than that, as early as late 8th.
Kendall, don't have to give me the exact round, but pretty close in your mind of with Tycoon there?
I mean, in my rookie drafts, I'm usually out. I draft more rookies than anybody I know, other than maybe you, right? I go all young. I almost never compete year one in most of my dynasty leagues because I just want to grab a lot of young talent and figure it out and kind of go from there. So possibly higher. I'm looking at like the players he's around in like dynasty rankings right now to kind of see like in my own thoughts, where are some guys that are middle aged that I would have him above, get high enough? Would I have to slide him down? I just have like ECR dynasty wide receiver ranks pulled up right now. And like he's wide receiver 50. Just above him is like Rashid Shaheed, Ricky Pearsall, Ridley, Christian Watson, Khalil Shakir. One, I think Ricky Pearsall is just crazy that he's that low in my opinion. But I would have him over a decent amount of these guys. Like I would have Xavier Leggett above Khalil Shakir. I think he's knocking on the door of Coleman. It's pretty close in opportunity. But I can't get him above like the next group of guys above that. I'll take him above the veterans that are being ranked too high, but none of the rookies. Like I would have him above Deontay Johnson, right? I would have him above. Yeah, no, that's really as high as he can get. It's weird that he's kind of like the highest of that tier. He just can't go any higher because he can't go above Ricky Pearsall. But the guys below him, I like him a lot more than like Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Doubs, Adonai Mitchell, Jerry Jeudy, Dontavian Wicks. Those guys are all below him. He's like so above those guys where I think there's probably a tier of like running backs that would kind of appear that I would definitely take him over, right? If it's like questionable wide receiver versus I need a running back, should I take him here? How often does that come up in a startup draft where you're like, hey, I have to take a running back at some point? I am absolutely taking Xavier Legette and his potential upside over like a solid running back where I need to take one, because I think he's an asset that is going to be pretty solid at worst for a reasonable period of time. And God forbid if his quarterback play actually improves, like it can't get much worse, right? So if he's performing okay with bad quarterback play, where could he go from there?
It can't get worse. And the reason I say it can't get worse as a certainty is because they'll pull him again. They'll pull Bryce Young again. You know what I mean? Like, so if Bryce Young goes back to what Bryce Young was weeks 1 and 2, fine. They'll just bring in Andy Dalton, or they'll go and draft somebody, or they'll go and sign Joe Flacco next. You know what I mean? Like, they'll go figure it out for a season. I struggle with, I'm on the clock here. I'm just going to grab a guy here and keep this moving. But I struggle with, what is this offense going to be long term? Who is the quarterback going to be? Because you're right, volume is king at the running back position. And I pulled some stuff, and I just may have changed it here. Yeah. Xavier Legette saw 6 targets last week. Fine. That was a Bryce Young offense. 7 the week before. Bryce Young offense. All the targets when Andy Dalton was on the field were going to Deontay Johnson. Right? Like, you guys tune in on Thursdays, right? I know we do betting stuff on our own, but for me, I was playing Deontay Johnson in DFS for those couple of weeks with Andy Dalton because he was seeing double-digit targets. I don't care what those targets look like in cash. I just need you to get me double-digit targets and turn that into something. And I was cashing. I had other good players in there, right? Gibbs and some of these other guys. But, like, that's great value for $5,600 in my DFS lineup. So it's not a DFS show. But my point being is that now that everybody's gone, Bryce Young was named the starter this week, which tells me that Andy Dalton is either A, not fully recovered from the car crash, or B, they're just going to go back to the rookie and say, all right, kid, this is your probably last shot. So I think this week against the Giants, then the bye week, I think this week's really important because then look who he has coming up. And I don't know if you're going to get a fair shake against Kansas City, Tampa, and Philly for 3 straight weeks coming out of the bye. And then it's Dallas, Arizona, which not so great. But Kansas City and Tampa, if Xavier Legette can get it done against those 2 defenses, then I think we have a pretty serious conversation of, is he the wide receiver 1 in Carolina there. So let's move on here. So Jalen Wright starts the 3rd round. Jatavian Sanders at the 302. Nice. And then Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk back-to-back with Marshawn Lloyd, Ben Sennett, and then Isaac Garenda, who didn't think would get back to me, but was hoping he would. It would have been a smash pick for me at the 309, but Garendo at the 307. And then Theo Johnson, actually, who I would have considered at the 309, going right there at the 308. So I took Roman Wilson here, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because we don't have a lot to talk about. But here's why I took Roman Wilson, and I want to get your guys' thoughts. He hasn't played, which is a stupid sentence because he hasn't played. He's been on IR. But it's George Pickens and who? Right? That's always the question in Pittsburgh. There still is. Pittsburgh just traded for somebody this week, and my brain's going blank. Somebody tell me who it was.
All the guys they keep trying to trade for and then never were able to.
I thought they brought someone in. Didn't they just bring another receiver in? Or am I making that up?
First, they were supposed to bring in Kirk, and then they couldn't get Kirk.
That's who.
Because he got injured, and then they were looking at Darius Slayton, and they decided not to. They've looked at a billion people and haven't brought anybody in.
Mike Williams.
They brought in Mike Williams. Right, exactly. So again, you didn't bring in somebody because Mike Williams either won't be there next year or he'll be hurt, which he always is. And Mike Williams to me is not a threat. So my question, Tycoon, I'll start with you. We see Spencer Rattler at the 310. We see A.D. Mitchell at the 311. And we have on the board here Troy Franklin, Jermaine Burton, Malachi Corley, McCaffrey, Javon Baker, that kind of a tier. Would you take a shot on Roman Wilson, or would you have pivoted else? Don't worry about roster construction right now or what your team needs. What do you think about that Roman Wilson pick at the 309, given who was off the board, who clearly was better picks, and then, of course, who was on the board, knowing that we just haven't seen him play yet?
I think the fact that even after the draft, all throughout the offseason, the Steelers were still aggressively trying to land another strong wide receiver is kind of telling. That they probably don't view Roman as the solution as the second wide receiver long term. So I'm I mean, as with everybody at this point in the draft, you're looking at several tiers below reliable starting players.
Yeah, you're taking shots here.
But with the Steelers' inability really to make that trade and going into next year, he really does seem to have the inside track for that second wide receiver position. I don't hate it. I've seen nothing from Mitchell that excites me. I have virtually no interest in Franklin. Jermaine Burton doesn't look like he's especially interested in NFL football right now. So, I mean, having been benched and then found at the casino later, maybe it's homerism. I mean, Jacob Cowing is maybe the other guy I'm willing to take a shot on, just being in the 49ers
interesting.
offense. But
Yep.
Other than that, no, I think Wilson amongst that receiver group would have been the guy I would have taken the shot on also.
Yeah, I mean, Kendall, I'm gonna throw it to you in just a second here. I agree with you. I think that them bringing in another receiver is telling. The caveat to that, the part that I would just say I maybe just disagree with, is Roman Wilson got hurt in preseason, and he never recovered from that injury. So, and again, it's the what if game, right? The whole
those trade efforts, at least reportedly, were going on well before preseason.
True. And I agree with you. And again, I would have traded for a guy knowing that I've got a rookie that I don't know what I have in anyway, right? Unless you're drafting, one of these first round guys, which they're clearly not. You're not getting a Neighbors or an MHJ. You're getting, a reliable slot receiver from Michigan with limited production in a Harbaugh McCarthy offense. I still just, Kendall, my question to you and Manny here in the chat, Manny U. Brown, I worry about the quarterback that Wilson has to catch balls from. Do you worry about Roman Wilson's ability to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense because of the quarterback? Do you worry about his wide receiver 2 ability in this offense because maybe he's just not that guy? Or do you feel like in the third round here, I'm going to take a shot on upside because I can see a path to him being the 2 versus some of these other names, Franklin, Mitchell, Cowing, who we just mentioned? What are your thoughts there?
I'm not super worried about the quarterback when it comes to slot receiver. Realistically, I'm looking at overall volume. I think he could, pun intended, slot in as just a little bit of a reliable target. Oh, yeah, there you go. Look, they're going to run the ball. The problem is they're going to run the ball. I thought Freiermuth was going to have a better season because I thought Russ tends to lock on to tight ends, and I think he's a talented guy. And then the passing volume just hasn't been there for pretty much anybody. And Najee Harris has 3 straight 100-yard rushing games. They want to run the ball. Yeah, it's crazy right now. I like it. Like for Phil, I think what you said is like you haven't seen it, so there is actually some upside because he hasn't disappointed anybody. I do think they need someone who can just get open. Like they missed the Deontay Johnson role of just someone get open quickly so we can move the chains. Can we have can we get 5 yards so that like we can actually do something meaningful with the playbook? I like him in that role. Yeah, I think he's good. I think the upside is limited because the entire offense seems to be, no matter what, forever. It just kind of wants to do what it's going to do, which is they're going to win games and put up like 0 fantasy points. Like, I don't know how they win games and are not fantasy relevant. They're like the most winning team that I can't start anybody on, which is a little bit frustrating. So, but when you're looking at what you're looking at, I think, Phil, you hit the nail on the head, which is I want some upside and I need someone who hasn't disappointed me and the NFL yet. And he just hasn't, right? So for those reasons,
there's still time. There's still lots of time. It's Arthur Smith. Let's call a spade a spade. No, I'm kidding.
To be fair, but also right. A rookie, when you're playing a slot wide receiver, you're not in high leverage situations, which does mean like, you're not going to get a bunch of touchdowns thrown to you, but it does mean it's low pressure, right? You're not the focal point of the defense, so you should be a little more open. You don't mind throwing a rookie, slot guy a bunch of balls, like having a Greg Dortch a bunch, right? It's like sometimes you just pepper your slot guy, and you could bench him the next week. But sometimes slot guys just get peppered, and I think this is an offense that just wants to move the chains, and I think he might be okay. I see him as like a 5 for 55 guy, but could he be more than that? And that's not a bad baseline. There's a lot of rookies that wish that was a baseline.
I think when you look at third round players and a lot of dynasty rookie drafts are 3 rounds. Some I've seen 4. I'll be honest. I'm in one league that has 5 rounds and I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like for what? I'm going to put those guys on my taxi squad anyway.
If it's
you know what I mean?
Like 2 tight end league. Okay.
even still, it's like, those guys aren't. It's like a guillotine league. You're just cutting those guys next season, unless you just happen to get a Puka, or you grab a Tyrone Tracy that's like going to be relevant. The percentage chance is so low. But on these third round guys, I'm taking shots on players where I see relevance and I see a path to playing time. And Darius Slayton had double-digit targets those couple weeks. That's 2 weeks that Neighbors was out. On an offense we hate, with a quarterback that we all presume is not going to be the quarterback and probably not going to be a starter in the NFL next year. So sometimes you just need a guy who's going to hang on to your roster for a little while to plug and play when the injuries happen, when the bye weeks happen, that could actually give you some usable weeks. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Roman Wilson is Darnell Mooney. But Darnell Mooney was basically left for dead, guys. You know this, in dynasty communities, because there was no relevance in Chicago. Justin Fields couldn't throw a ball to save his life. He was a running quarterback. You couldn't trade Mooney. He goes to Atlanta, and now all of a sudden he's having this great season. And Drake London's day to day. I mean, like, there's a path for a Roman Wilson, like there was for Mooney, to be relevant again. And it just didn't happen his rookie season. Obviously, Wilson's going to miss this season on IR, but I didn't want to spend that much time on Roman Wilson. This went longer, but I think it's just, again, we're doing this in the middle of the year because we've got some information, but Roman Wilson, we have nothing on. And so I think it's a good exercise as you go into the off season to keep some of these things in mind of, what am I really drafting for? It's how we started the show. Are we drafting for BPA, best player available? Are we drafting for positional need? Brock Bowers? Are we drafting for, what we've really got to get? So I'm curious in the chat, guys, if you guys are hanging in the chat, who are some players that, you took shots on that you've been excited about? And I'm also curious, where are some guys that you wish you had taken a shot? Obviously, we know the easy ones, but, we're in the 4th round here thinking about, upside. Who are some guys on your teams that we should be thinking about for next season?
See if we can get this 30 mic and speed it up just a little bit.
Shoot him a chat and see if he's still there.
I think you just put a shot clock on. So you can just flip it to like a 2-minute clock. Real quick.
Yeah, I think
or 1 minute if you need to. We'll be all set there. We kind of
talk through. We're gonna run over guys that we wanted to talk about here. I don't think we need to spend too much time on these 4th round guys. I think I had the clock on, for those that are listening at home, I had the clock on 4 hours so that no one got force picked into something, or if Kendall and myself got caught on a take and all of a sudden we got auto picked there. That only happened once.
We're waiting for Dirty Mike to auto pick, and then I'm up. Wanted to just grab a couple folks in chat. Not sure if they're still here. Cap for Life had a trade question, not the trade show though, and I don't want to jump into Phil's show. Please drop that as a comment on this video or one of our other videos. We don't really dive into trade questions on this show. Otherwise, that's like it's a whole 2 other shows that we do. So I definitely want to answer that, but we want to answer it with the usual fervor that we might otherwise. So please drop that as a comment. We'll try to get it to you in any of our videos or in the Sleeper channel. And we have a whole group text. We'll get you some good in-depth insight on that. Cap for Life, appreciate you. Interesting one here. Tracy looking great. Worried about older prospect on a team that could lose everything. Is that a big factor for you with Tyrone Tracy? Is it a flash in the pan this year, but everything quarterback coaching change, the whole thing could blow up and get caught in the middle of it? Is that a consideration for either of you guys?
Tycoon, go ahead. You can take that one first. Go ahead.
It is a little bit actually, and that's why I drafted Irving ahead of Tracy there in the 2nd round. But more so the age of the prospect at the position than the coaching staff, although I do think that is still a bit of a consideration, just because, especially as an older prospect, if they do decide to clean house with coach, GM, everything, I mean, they'll have absolutely no loyalty to him whatsoever. I mean, they'll be looking to really, I think, completely rebuild this thing. So it is a little bit of a hesitation for me, yes.
I think with any older prospect, it's a hesitation. The caveat is quite simply, he's on a rookie contract. I play Dynasty in a 2 to 3 year window. I think he could still be relevant enough for 2 more seasons, even if they clean house. And I expect that they will. I think that they will let the GM Shane and Dable go because can we just be honest for 10 seconds? Saquon Barkley got them to the playoffs and won that playoff game. They turn around and dump $1 billion on Daniel Jones, who quite honestly wasn't that great. And they don't pay the guy who actually got them there. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about how good Saquon Barkley is. If that's what you're looking for in this show, maybe fantasy football is not for you. But the guy just backwards hurdled somebody. Get out of here.
Insane.
What I will say, though, is I do think I've seen enough from Tyrone Tracy to at least feel confident that even with a change in coaching staff, he makes this roster. And if not, he goes somewhere else because someone's trading for him. They obviously feel he's good enough to be in the rotation. So I think you can get some usable weeks out of him, even if he doesn't end up becoming the guy in New York. With that said, I am on the clock with 26 seconds here. You know what, Luke McCaffrey? Let's give it a shot, man.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not?
DNA.
Jahan Dotson's out the door. I haven't really seen anything that makes me feel like they've got a solid wide receiver 2 there after Terry. So, it hasn't been great this first year, but whatever. It's the 4th round. Let's take a shot.
Yeah, man. I feel like it's crazy. Like this class really was that deep, man. Because we were talking before the show, we're going to do a 3-round draft. And I kind of pushed Phil to get to the 4th round because I'm like, the 4th round's like my favorite this year. Because I feel like I want the entire, if I could trade a 2nd round pick for the entire 4th round, I think I might do it this year. I actually like a lot of these guys that much. It's kind of I've never seen this before.
Let me ask you this, Kendall, because I know Tycoon. I know you've got to get ready to jump for another thing here, and we're obviously on the last pick here, so we're going to wrap the show in the next 5 minutes. Troy Franklin at the 401, Kamani Vidal, Jordan Whittington, Jalen, I think, Coker, lots of Jalen's. Jacob Cowing, Javon Baker, Jermaine Burton, Malachi Corley, Luke McCaffrey, Bub Means, Cade Stover, and we'll finish the draft here in just a second. You like these 4th round guys, Kendall. Give me the player that you like the most and what you think his involvement / outcome could be here over the next 2 seasons. Jordan Travis at the 412.
Love that pick, by the way, Jordan. That was such a money pick. Oh my god, I love that pick so much. I was gonna throw an honorable mention. By the way, I'm waiver wiring Jordan Travis, and I feel fantastic about it. My favorite in the 4th round. I'm gonna give a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place because they're pretty close. I'm gonna go 1st place for max upside going into next year is probably Troy Franklin. There's still some loyalty with the quarterback. I don't love him, but I feel like where he's priced and can go, the sky is the limit next year. That is one of those. Me and Phil often talk about ambiguous running backfields or ambiguous wide receiver groups. It's usually the running backs that we talk about. We like investing into ambiguity because there's always upside in the uncertain ambiguity, right? Things always happen. And I can see some things happening with Troy Franklin because there's a lot of volatility and they need someone to do something. The dude just needs to put some weight on and make something happen because these tiny little skin and bones guys are just not making it work. But I do see some upside there. I'm actually going to give him
very briefly before you go to your next one.
Yes,
because I do have to run. I wanted to say thank you.
Yeah,
guys.
I was gonna pause real quick and
very much appreciate it. No, this is an awesome show. Can't wait till we have our next one, and we have another program we still all need to be talking about. Getting
we
together.
will. Yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
And
dude, I've got the template
viewers,
for it, man.
Thank you. Yeah, well, let's talk real soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tycoon. Love you, brother. We'll see you.
All right. Later, brothers.
See ya. Tycoon obviously being here. We love that. I know he's got to jump for something personal tonight. I'll tease it for the people. Kendall, Tycoon, and myself have been working on an adaptation of my Thursday betting show. So stay tuned. Kendall, the suspense builds as we go. It'll be a good one. I know that I'm excited for what we've been talking about. All right. So Troy Franklin in that 1st spot, your 2nd and 3rd place, that silver medal in this 4th round going to drum roll.
I'm actually changing I'm giving Franklin the 2nd spot. Actually, I can't because I'm I'm too in on this player.
Well, let's go with your bronze medal and save the gold medal for last. So Franklin in the middle there.
Bronze medal is going to go to Bub Means. For Nones. Really like that. One, it's nice because you can pop him on your IR spot. So from roster construction, it's fantastic. But don't know what this team looks like next year. Him, Mason Tipton, Shaheed, Olave. I don't know what happens. It's all over the place. It's one of those guys I don't know, but he could come out of absolutely nowhere and just be really good. He could legitimately be almost a wide receiver 2 on that team next year. I just don't know. I like the upside. I can't give it to all these other like chalky guys who have disappointed because Bub Means hasn't disappointed yet. I just like the pick, and I also like it because 4th rounder that you can throw in your IR spot. This is like a redraft trick. So like I have to tip the cap to like the old school redraft. Like, yeah, I'm going to take my 4th rounder and then I'm going to grab, the 413. So that's just a nice pick. And I'm going to throw that into my bronze medal, but I do have a gold medal here. It's my pick. I don't know how this happened. I don't know how it got there. I don't think people scrolled down far enough because you had to go, but like this kid's money, man. Jordan Whittington came out of nowhere. The Rams are all injured. Like literally the entire team is injured. Comes out, has some very, very solid games. And we know that Cup's sticking around, but can't stay healthy, right? And will be gone at some point. Puka can't stay healthy, is also a brawler. He's fantastic, right?
Apparently, yeah. What is he doing?
He had injury issues in college. That's why his draft stock fell in the NFL. I was in on Puka. That's why I drafted a lot of him in Dynasty because I liked him, but he did have injury issues. That's what crashed his stock in the actual NFL draft. But Jordan Whittington, he should step in to a wide receiver 3 role on a team that throws the ball a lot. Anytime that Tutu Atwell has to step in as a wide receiver 3, he ends up with 20 fantasy points somehow. And this guy is better, different type of wide receiver, but stepping into an offense that I like, that I think people generally like. I don't know what's going to happen year 2, 3, 4. I don't see the long, but the longer it goes, the more that I think it's going to be him and Puka. This is a team and organization and identity. If the coaching stays the same for at least a little bit, that like to work with the guys they work with, right? I think as early as next year, he could be stepping into a very consistent, like the usage that Tyler Lockett has this year, weird comparison, but I think he could have that usage as like a minimum, right? Because Lockett's kind of the third wheel to 2 very good wide receivers, but still very productive because they throw the ball a lot. Gino was leading the NFL in passing yards for a little while. Might still be. I don't think he still is anymore. But I think Whittington is going to benefit from that immensely. I think he has a combination of a startable, flexible floor with, what kind of upside do you want? The offense could be good. Everyone in front of him is made of glass. You pick your poison. Floor plus good ceiling. He's a steal in the 4th round. Very, very nice. I would take him over half of the 3rd round at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting player for me, and I think about 2 questions. Number 1, are the Rams going to be a playoff team? Because if they are, then they're drafting towards the back half of that 1st round, really that back 3rd, maybe even quarter of that 1st round. So what are they doing with that 1st round pick? The other thing I think about with the Rams, and this is, I agree with you, Kendall. I see a path, and I see, Cup could be gone. It's, you're right. The coaches like to work with the players they have. Puka's great when he's there, and he has missed time. I still wonder if, because it's the Rams, if they don't go get T. Higgins this offseason. Right, and I bring that name up intentionally because we've talked about
pieces of glass in front of him.
Yeah, well, you're not kidding. At least the Bengals are doing the right thing and ruling him out early in the week, so I don't have to freaking sit there on Sunday and go, "Hey, T, are you playing today?" No, you're not. Oh, too late. Great, now I'm screwed.
Yeah, and Olave's doubtful.
Olave ain't playing this. He ain't playing.
What are we doing with this doubtful nonsense? Like Carr was doubtful when he was wearing sneakers. What are we
doing? You can put Olave on your bench this week. We don't need to wait till Friday for the sit-start show. He's going to see a neuroscientist or neurologist or whatever he's seeing for his 2nd concussion. He ain't playing. But again, regardless of T. Higgins' health, the Rams like to make splashes, right? This was the first year in 6 years, I think, where they actually had a 1st round pick. So maybe 7 years. T. Higgins could be re-signed, but we all believe most likely he's not a Bengal next year. They've got to pay Jamar Chase because they didn't this year. So, you and I talked about it on some of our early summer shows of, I said, but right before Michael Pittman signed the contract, I thought because he's a USC guy, does he leave and go to the Rams? T. Higgins, does he leave because before he signed his franchise tag, does he go to the Rams, right?
I think they grabbed Debo before any of those guys personally.
I don't think Kyle Shanahan's going to let that happen. But
you got a point. Shanahan probably wouldn't let that happen.
Probably will say. And to be fair, like, did Debo even want to go? Where I think Debo goes, in all honesty? I think he goes to Carolina.
Well, that's interesting.
He's from there. Xavier Leggette's his boy. His family is there. Obviously he doesn't want to go there if he wants to win, but if he's not going to get a chance to go and play for, I don't know, we'll see. But I put it this way. I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't rule it out.
I'll tell you where he should go, but definitely won't.
Please don't say it. I was going to say, please don't say it. It's going to make me vomit. I don't even want to hear about it.
Oh, can't have it.
You know what's been nice this week? I will say this. I know we've had all this election nonsense, but Jerry hasn't made any stupid comments that I've heard this week. So it's been kind of nice to just have a week of Jerry-free nonsense coming out of the social media channels. Of course, now he doesn't have a quarterback. So Cooper Rush, DFS, we're going to be talking about him this week. Put him in your DFS pool. Don't rule him out. He was good last year. Cooper Rush was not incompetent. He was good for DFS last year. Do not go trade for Cooper Rush in Dynasty. Don't start him in your single quarterback leagues. But my point is like in a DFS league where you need 12 points, you probably get you that. Let's just take a really quick peek. I'm not going to read all the names off. Obviously, if you're watching the show, you can see it. If you're listening to the show, you've heard me read them off. But Kendall, I want you to take a quick look at the board and give me one player that you think is mispriced that somebody got a great value on in this draft tonight. In any round, of course. In any round.
Mispriced. Ricky Pearsall. It's a big standout to me. I don't think he's ridiculously dissimilar to Ladd McConkey in a year's time. We play Dynasty in a larger window. It feels like Pearsall was a little bit mispriced. That's the one that's sticking out to me initially.
Well, it makes me feel good because that was my pick. So I appreciate that. You always like to feel like, hey, you did a good job. You made a good pick. I'm not going to pick my own guy. To me, one of the players that I think is mispriced here is Isaac Guerrero. And this is not the 49ers variety hour, even though I'm a Niners fan. But Isaac Guerrero, and I've said this before, and you got to follow this a little bit. It is very possible. Christian McCaffrey has one more season, and then they have an out on the contract. Do they really want to re-sign him? Or in this case, do they want to restructure his contract? I don't know the answer to that yet, right? I believe, and it hurts me to say this, I think Rasta's probably in the show. He's going to be mad at me for saying this. I think it's possible that the Niners window is closing with this particular group of players. George is getting old. Debo is getting old. Debo very, very realistically could be a cap casualty. It is possible now that they keep Debo because of the Ayuk injury and not being available. But they've got Cowing. They've got Pearsall. I wonder if the Niners believe that they can win the Super Bowl or at least get them a deep playoff run, if they restructure McCaffrey's contract, because Guerrero is on a rookie deal, and this is what I said, you got to follow me here. I wonder if they wouldn't trade Mason because I believe he is worth something and they could get some good value back, which is why I like Isaac Guerrero. He fits the cap, which is, I know we talk about Dynasty and we want volume and points and all of our stuff, but when you play Dynasty, you have to think about that kind of stuff. You've got to look at contracts. You've got to look at cap casualties. Mm-hmm. This is why players end up in different teams.
You get pay Mason at some point, and
that's the other piece. You
probably have to let him go get the bag.
And that's the other piece is, can they afford to keep Mason? You've paid Debo. You've just paid Ayuk. You're going to pay Brock Purdy this year. You've already paid Kittle. You've paid Christian McCaffrey. You've paid Bosa. I mean, like, this is what I'm saying. Like, you've paid guys, and there's other defensive players we won't get into right now, but from a football perspective, they're not fantasy relevant, but they have paid those guys. And I believe Brock Purdy I don't think he's going to reset the market, but I do think he's going to get probably a Trevor Lawrence type contract.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, this is a guy that went to 2 Super Bowls. Now, he lost them, but he's been there. Oh, sorry, 1 Super Bowl, but Jimmy, I guess, was in the last one. But my point being is, like, Trevor Lawrence went to the playoffs, won 1 game because they played the fucking Chargers, and the Chargers collapse in the most hilarious ways possible, always. Right? So I do believe it is a world where Isaac Guerrero winds up as the RB2 in San Francisco with McCaffrey or with Mason. But I think it's the most logical choice to keep him from a cap perspective. And he's looked okay when he's played. He had the big run against Seattle. He's been a good return guy this year. We know what we'll see what we get out of him the rest of this series and next year. But I would take Guerrero over Ben Sinnott. I would take Guerrero over Marshawn Lloyd right now.
I would too. The long-term upside, I think, is there. Is it fair to say we have to look at like the contracts are always a big thing in Dynasty. You really got to do the homework when it comes to this and how you value it. But like worst case scenario, is it him and Mason for a year if CMC is gone, and then it's Garendo afterwards? Like the most Mason you'd have to deal with is like 1 year, unless CMC is gone and Mason is the new CMC. But I think the overlap's too much. Like I don't think you can keep all three, and Garendo can't leave because he's a rookie. So you can't keep all three, which means you can't keep CMC and Mason. I just don't see a world where that makes sense. And it feels like Mason's the odd man out.
The only way you keep all three is if you sacrifice elsewhere. Right. And yeah. George is there another season. At some point he'll leave, or he may not retire, but at some point he won't be a Niner and they'll go get younger. He's going to be 31. He's 31, I think. Yeah. So there's just
I just thought about this too, actually. Like, there's a connection with the coaching staff and Christian McCaffrey. There's like a family thing, right? There's something to that.
Ed McCaffrey played for the Broncos for Papa.
You don't have the awkward like Mason eating into CMC's touches because he's earned it. When you have that sort of thing, you let CMC be free, which means you have to sell Mason. Which like Brady having Brissett backing him up for a while, right? It was like we got to get rid of Brissett because Brady needs just all the space to like not have to worry about anything. I could kind of see that being a narrative too, where it's like Mason, we love you, but the way that you need to be treated is never going to happen with CMC here.
I mean, I agree. I mean, the Niners tend to do right by their players. That seems to be one of the organizational's key pillars. But anyway, I think Garendo's mispriced here. I would take him over Jalen Wright. I would take him over Marshawn Lloyd. I would certainly take him over Audric Estime. And I'd probably take him over Blake Corum at this point. I mean, I get it. Corum's going to, potentially one injury away from being in an offense similar to the Niners, high-powered offense, good offensive weapons, not so great defense. But to me, he was a misprice simply because I think there's guys that we are drafting. Again, we do this and we have to do this. We're drafting based off of projection, but we do in this activity get the luxury of having seen half a season's worth of work. Marshawn Lloyd hadn't had to run the ball. Right? Jalen Wright, I've got the stats right here. Right? Like Jalen Wright has touched the ball 42 times for 208 yards. He's RB 74. Marshawn Lloyd has touched the ball 12 times. He's on IR. So, I mean, it's very possible that Garendo, you're right, that Mason is the odd man out, either financially or whatever the reasons may be. But again, good draft. I hope for the guys. I thank them in the chat, but if guys are still listening to the show, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you guys jumping in and giving us some of your time here on a Wednesday night. Makes it more fun when we've got actual live drafters making decisions and not the computer just going by ADP or, whatever the computer needs to do. Kendall, let's wrap the show. Tell the boys one more time and the folks at home where they can find you. And then I think we're going to get out of here on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, if you can, if you like listening to me and Phil, come check me out over at the Fantasy Football Tavern. I know I've been slacking a lot lately. I did a bunch of videos preseason and then in midseason. I've mostly been learning a little bit about what this whole YouTube thing is, how to do it, and really doing supporting work for the Get Right Fantasy Network cast of shows. But please do like and subscribe. Definitely come on over. That helps us out a ton. Lets us keep doing this as we go into the regular season. Hopefully, should have some more short-form videos coming. If not, in the off-season, you want to be subscribed because we are going to be, especially if you play Dynasty, me and Phil go very, very deep. He'll be on the channel a ton. We are going to solve all of your drafting questions, all of the trading questions, a lot of how do we remanipulate Dynasty rosters. And as we get to our playoff push and redraft, we are going to be talking about, setting that championship lineup. What do we got to do to actually take down the titles? So come check it out. Helps me out a ton. If you don't get a question answered in the show, drop it in one of the videos too. And we watch that like a hawk. So yeah, appreciate you guys. Oh, Phil, you're muted, bud.
I was there. I had a cough and decided to keep myself on mute. Apparently what I got to say. No, I'm kidding. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. If you are a fan of the show, jump on youtube.com/@theextrapointffb. Hit that like and subscribe button. I will be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. with our DFS underdog higher and lower. Kendall, you're always welcome to join me if you are around. And then I am praying, as we all are, to the football gods that tomorrow night with the Ravens and the Bungles, we get a proper Thursday night football game because I, as you, would like to see some points in our lineups. So for all of us here at the Get Right Fantasy Network, for myself at the Extra Point, Kendall at the Fantasy Football Tavern, and Tycoon at the Fantasy Boardroom, thanks for joining in to the show tonight. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And of course, if you can't make it tomorrow, make sure you are back on Friday for our 2-part sit start. Otherwise, enjoy your Wednesday night. We out.
Fantasy is the play. Marking nothing, but I tune in every Friday. Strategies provided, I will lock in every way. So go